Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another edition of Out of the Box with Beyond It. If this is the first time you're listening to us, a very warm welcome to you. If you're coming back for the third session, then welcome back. If in case you've missed our earlier sessions, which were on the last couple of weeks, the first session we spoke about how is that education is changing and embracing to the new normal. In the second edition, we spoke about how is that we can probably live a sustainable living, right? And in this edition, we're going to be speaking about how that you can stop being an armchair philosopher, go ahead and make some change in the society. How that the world can be a better place for you. So, without much delay, let me now call upon our host for the day, Raji, the co-founder of Beyond It.
Sample.
Good morning, and thank you for stepping out of the box with Beyond 8. Think problem solving, think Russell Ackoff, think public problem solving, think Ashwin Mahesh. Back in the 1970s, in his book, systems thinker Russell Ackoff talks about how the current education system, and this was back in the 1970s, how it is outdated and defunct because it focuses on completing purposeless exercises as opposed to focusing on solving real world problems. And if there is one person who can actually learn, demonstrate, propagate, and practice the art of solving the right problems in the right way with the right set of people, it is, of course, our Beyond 8 expert, Dr. Ashwin Mahesh. I'm not done yet, Ashwin. Everyone would introduce you, Ashwin, as an urbanist, a politician, a social technologist, or a journalist. But I would like to use the impact of your work to define you. Back when you were in NASA, 2 years as an astronomer, you found a way to discover a star. The actual discovery of the star, I think it's called LKH Alpha 234, companion to that star, that was merely a method, that was merely an evidence to prove that the method worked. And also 12 years as an atmospheric scientist in NASA, studying the clouds over the Antarctic and Arctic regions. Basically, the polar regions, they are extremely sensitive to global warming, and even small changes can result in a large impact. And hence, it is remarkable that Ashwin found the method to be able to separate blowing snow from the ice-topped Antarctic plateau. From clouds to stars to the ground problems that he solves in the city that he resides in, which is Bengaluru, Ashwin has founded a Center for Public Problem Solving, which accelerates civic improvements in his area. And while you have water, you have waste, you have roads, and these are all the focus of his work, he also focuses on restructuring the way Bengaluru can be governed. If one has to really see how science, mathematics, technology, arts, and humanities can combine together to actually create impactful solutions, wait no further, look no farther. Here it is, Ashwin Mahesh. Step on out of the box, Ashwin, with us.
Oh, thank you, Raji. Very nice of you to have a long introduction. I'm happy to be here on Beyond 8 this morning and look forward to this program.
Super. So I'm going to ask a few questions of you, Ashwin. I know these are all from your work, and I start with the first question. But before that, just a note to the audience as well. Please do share your questions on the Facebook message so that we will address it towards the end of it. Dr. Ashwin Mahesh will be addressing all your questions towards the end of the session. So this is just a reminder for you to ask questions. And from my introduction, you would have realized that he can answer anything under the sky. So go on. My first question to you, Ashwin, is, in your opinion, what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong in containing the pandemic?
Well, there are two things that we are doing right. One is that we need to slow down the spread of the virus. And the reason you need to slow down the spread of the virus is that any health system at a given point, it can only deal with a certain number of patients. There are so many beds, so many intensive care units, so many ventilators, and so on and so forth. So if a very large number of people come to hospitals at the same time, the system will become overwhelmed. And you'll have to sort of, unfortunately, see a lot of people die. So what happens when you get a fast spreading virus is that you need to slow it down so that the speed at which people come to hospitals is manageable by those hospitals. That's one. So you need the lockdown to slow down the spread of the virus so that fewer people are coming to hospitals on a daily basis and too many don't come. But having done that, you have to now strengthen the hospital system. You have to buy the equipment that the medical staff need. You have to make sure that you have protective gear, supplies of drugs, and whatever else that is needed to respond to a COVID patient coming to a hospital. And you need to be able to do this everywhere, not just in a few hospitals, because the virus is spreading so fast. And we were a little slow to get off the ground with that. But now I see that both manufacture and procurement of the things that we need is going on quickly, and perhaps that will help. There is, however, one difficulty. You can buy equipment quickly, you can buy supplies of medicines quickly, you can't create doctors and nurses quickly. And that will be a limitation. But these are the realities that fundamentally, it's always a challenge to ask in a crisis, what can we do now? Because some part of the answer is, well, these things we should have done earlier. It's like someone was asking, I was telling someone the other day, supposing you wanted to join the Indian cricket team today, but you've not really played much cricket before. It's just not going to happen. You need years of practice, competitive talent emerges from that. And it's the result of all that you get the outcome that you want. And it's the same way in a public health system too. You need years of investment and lots of people doing lots of things. And when you don't have that in a crisis, you are limited as to what you can do. The other thing that's interesting about this crisis is that we are seeing, for the first time, a rapid response of the scientific community to a real live problem. The speed with which drug testing, vaccine development, and experimentation with treatments is going on today is unprecedented. And of course, that involves risks, but it's also, it's really brought together thousands of scientists from around the world to try something like this. And usually in drug discovery, there's one thing that doesn't happen. People don't go around, when there's an illness, people don't usually go around saying, we have all these drugs, let's see if any of them works on this illness. They usually try to develop a response to that illness. But in this case, because of the scale of the problem and the harshness of the problem, there's a different kind of effort which is going on, which is people looking around at existing drugs and trying to see if any of them will work against COVID.
And I think the size of India and our population also brings in a lot of uniqueness in all of this, right? So what are the unique challenges that India faces in this effort in comparison to other countries?
See, I don't agree that people are a problem, right? If there are lots of people, then there are lots of people to serve them also. So in a way, it's not fair to see that as a problem. But unfortunately, people alone are not enough. You need those people to be trained, prepared, and sufficiently capable of responding to something like this. If you see, for example, the experience in Kerala, a lot of people have written about this quite a bit to say, why are some states able to respond better to this than other states? Of course, one part of the answer is the epidemic is not as strong in some states as in other states. But even apart from that, one of the things that's helping is that states that have good local administration can respond better, because in every community they have a public health center, they have trained medical staff, and being able to respond quickly requires these things, even before the epidemic hits. One of Kerala's advantages is that it has a reasonably good public health network, and so they're able to respond that much better. Some of that is true in Tamil Nadu too, and some other states have bits and pieces of that. But even where you have a reasonable health network, you can still get overwhelmed if the number of cases are very large. And that's a risk that we continue to carry.
Actually, thank you for that thought, Ashwin, because we keep saying that it's the population that basically, stops us from progress. But I guess, like you rightly said, it's not about population, but it's about systems and people actually being skilled to handle problems. Thank you for that thought. And so, where does the buck stop in the fight against COVID-19? How can each section of the society take responsibility for this situation?
Well, there are two or three things. The primary responsibility today is with scientists and with administrators, politicians and administrators. And the one community has to go look for the solutions. Another community, another group has to hold the fort until the solution is found. Right? Both are important. It's a real problem. It's a large problem. We don't have a solution. So you need one team of people who keep things manageable until a solution is found. And you need another team of people to really rush to find the solution. Both of these are difficult. Both of these involve challenges and risks. But there's no alternative at this point. This is what is needed. The science is on three fronts. Whether any of the existing drugs can work, especially anti-inflammatory drugs. A lot of people don't know this. It's the virus itself is not killing anybody. It's the inflammation of the lungs that is caused by the way the immune system responds to the virus, which is killing a lot of people. So anti-inflammatory drugs is one of the things that people are looking at. Vaccine development is another thing that people are looking at. A third thing is that even if you survive coronavirus, but if it damages some of your vital organs, then you haven't really sort of come through it cleanly. So managing, because a lot of people who are dying also have other morbidities. They suffer from diabetes or something else as well, cancer, things like that. So it's important to protect their other organs while they're being treated for coronavirus as well. So all of these things have to be done by the scientific community. The political and administrative community has to find a balance between economic harm and public health risk. This is a big challenge all over the world. It's a particularly big challenge in countries with large numbers of poor people. A very large number of people in India are living hand to mouth. They don't eat if they don't work. And there's only so much that feeding programs can do. That in some cities we're seeing, whether it's Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore, we're seeing large feeding programs organized by the government. But in many communities, people are also saying that only a small subset of people who need food assistance are being reached by these feeding programs. And so there are communities who are helping their neighbors a lot more than the government is able to do this itself. And then there are migrants who want to go home, because in a crisis like this, they seek a kind of refuge, both an emotional refuge, even if not a physical refuge, they're seeking an emotional and a psychological refuge. And you can't take that away. And it's not right for rich people or the government to decide what poor people should do. A lot of people say, for example, it's better the migrants are where they are. That's true, but if you ask them, they may not agree with that. And there is a democratic deficit in doing it that way. And these are real challenges. So administrators and politicians have to say, what's the best we can do to keep the maximum number of people alive during a crisis like this? I actually think that we could tolerate rising numbers of cases if they did not translate into rising numbers of deaths. And this is an important distinction. There are a lot of people, for example, if you look at India today, there are three kinds of states. There are states where the number of cases is rising and the number of deaths is also rising quickly. Then there are states where the number of cases seems to be rising steadily, but not that many people are dying. Right? Tamil Nadu is a case in point. There are some 2,500 people or something like that who have got the virus, but only some 25 odd people have died so far. So the mortality rate is still low in some states. And then there are states where neither there are that many cases, obviously, and therefore there are not that many deaths as well. And these have to be treated as very different situations. So the primary responsibility is with, let's say, scientists and administrators and politicians. But they are not the only people with responsibility. Ordinary people also have a responsibility. And you and I have a responsibility. And those responsibilities are more immediate, more personal in the space around us, for people around us. Now, it's quite possible that this won't add up to a solution. This is not going to stop the virus. But stopping the virus is not the thing that you and I can contribute to, except by our own behavior. We can maintain some social distancing at most. But stopping the economic harm is something that we can contribute to. People that work for us, can we protect their livelihood? People that we know to be desperately poor around us who need food assistance, can we support that? These are things that are easy and quick to get into at a time like this, and people can see the value of doing it as well. And these are, if you do it, it can become habit forming also. These things, I look around and I see who is doing this most, even in cities where these examples are happening. It's the people who are already connected with public problem solving and assisting the poor, who are in a position to do this quickly as well. So the unfortunate truth is that for all of us who want to do something good, it has to first become habit forming. If it's not a habit, it's difficult to wake up one day and say, I want to do a good thing today. Being able to do good is the result of a system of doing good. And that system benefits from structure, from participation, from preparedness, and all sorts of other things. And you can't construct those things quickly. This is what I meant by saying you can't decide today, I want to play for the Indian cricket team. You should have made that decision when you were 14 years old and started trying from there.
Beautiful insight, Ashwin. And I think you make it all look simple, but you also say, you also showcase how much effort is required to be able to do the things that we would like to do. Lots of questions raining in from our viewers, but I would like to ask one last question before we move on. And before asking that one last question, I don't know if you remember, Ashwin, 10 years ago at HLC in the chemistry lab, we both were having a conversation, and I was asking, so we need to, we need to have our children become change makers, change the world, and what do we do at HLC? How do we equip them with this? And you were talking about social quotient. And you said that before even thinking about solving problems of the world, let us start equipping ourselves. And the way we equip ourselves is to first understand who we are as HLC and what are the problems that we have in HLC. And you talked about just 3 questions. I don't know if you remember this, but the 3 questions were, how much waste is generated at HLC per day? How much water is consumed in HLC per day? And what is the electricity that is consumed in HLC per day? And I can tell you that those 3 simple questions, first of all, it took us years to even, put down processes and thoughts and, action towards understanding the answer. But it was also beautiful that those 3 simple questions led on to actually the development of the global public problem solving diploma, which we call Kartavyam, and how it believes in increasing the number of public problem solvers, pretty much the cause that you're talking about, Ashwin. And in relation to that is my question to you. Where do young learners come in? How can high school students apply their learning towards solving pressing problems during this pandemic?
Like I said, it's a difficult question, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. In a large crisis, it doesn't matter who you are. There's only so much you can do to respond. I think the biggest, if you're not already in the habit of engaging with public problems and working on them, I would encourage you to take this as an opportunity to get started. But it's important to continue doing it even after the virus seems to have been tackled. The way the question is asked sometimes makes the answer seem like, because there's a virus around, I have to do something. And that's not good enough, actually. There's a lot of things you should do even when the virus is not visibly around, because there are other things that are around which are less visible and in fact which are even more harmful. If you look at malaria or TB or malnutrition kills, I think, somewhere of the order of 1,000 people a day, or some bizarre number like that, right? And in all the time together that we've had this virus for the last several weeks, only about 1,000 people have passed away in India. So on scales, there are other problems that are compelling problems as well. So whatever you choose to do in response to the pandemic, I would do it in a way that you can and intend to continue after the pandemic as well. Because if you don't make that choice, you're not going to be very sort of effective in making a dent in public problems. Persistence is the biggest virtue. It's not skill alone. It's not knowing what to do. That helps. But a lot of people know what to do. You can just learn that from them.
Yeah.
You can't learn persistence without your own commitment to do that on a daily basis. And here, one thing is a lot of people believe that persistence means I have to go and give 2 hours of my day every day to do something. In my experience, you don't have to give a lot of time. It's enough if you give 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day to work on public problems. But you have to do it every day. And the importance of every day is extreme. It's like even if you miss a day, I've said this in some other forums too, if you miss a day, it's like missing a year. Because habits have accumulative value in public problem solving. So one is whatever you do, decide to do it in a way that you can continue. The second thing is that try not to do things yourself, but to try to do things in groups and with others. This helps build habits. This helps also, listen to and learn from others, communicate your ideas and see them, sort of how others receive them, listen to some of their ideas. All of that is important as well. A lot of problems can only be solved by collective action. So it's important to deliberately build the approach with that collective in it from the beginning. So try to do this with others rather than, and in fact, it's easier to get started if you simply say, let me see who has already started, I'll just support them.
Yeah.
A lot of people will say, I'm willing to do all these things, but there's nobody to do it with me. Actually, you can invert that by saying, let me find someone who's doing something useful and I'll just go and help them, right? And that's a much easier way to get started. The third thing is that this is a very complex problem. Educate yourself about the science of the problem too. It's a good problem around which to learn nuance and science and all of these kinds of things, because it's a peculiar kind of problem. It's a fast spreading global epidemic, right? And all the reasons that we are facing it in a particular way will become apparent if you think about each part of it. Why don't we have a cure? Why don't we have the ability to manage this many people getting sick simultaneously? Why is it that a lockdown is necessary? I mean, educating yourself about the nature of the problem is a good way to also come to an understanding of what you can do. The fourth thing is, in schools in particular, I think this can become the beginning of a focus on health and public health in particular. I know schools like HLC already do a few things in the communities around them, but perhaps this can become the beginning of a way to do something for community health in a very focused way. And community health involves so many other illnesses and that people need to be protected from as well. So it's not so much what you do in response to the virus alone, but it's if you can create a more generic response in which you're doing something to respond to the virus now, but that thing that you do has potential to be continued later, then that's a much better thing to do.
Super. Thank you so much, Ashwin. And I'm not going to take more time. I'll go to the questions. And the first question over here, Uday has asked this. Do you think that the numbers reported are actual? And do you think hunger, unemployment, leading to emotional and physical trauma is going to kill more people? Nice question.
Well, the numbers reported may not be accurate, but I think the trends may be accurate. Let me put it that way, that if you don't believe the numbers yesterday, then you don't believe them equally or in a similar way today as well. And if you say that the number of cases are underreported, I think it's more likely that cases are underreported. It's less likely that deaths are underreported. So if cases are underreported, it also means that the mortality rate is lower. Which is reassuring in one way. The key thing is, instead of counting cases and deaths, it would be better to count the capacity of the public health network. How many PPE kits do we have? How many ventilators do we have? How many ICU beds do we have in relation to what is being needed at any given time? I think that's a useful thing to count. I don't deny that the economic harm, sadly, if you count it merely in terms of deaths and wages lost and all of that, it may already be greater than the public health harm. That's the reality of the thing. But there's a hope that the economic harm is somehow more manageable than the health harm. This is the thinking, right? Yeah. That if you don't have a job, you know what to do about that. Help people try to find a job. If you don't have money, you can try to figure out how to put some money in their hands. If they don't have food, you can figure out how to feed them and so on and so forth. But the public health harm, the virus for which you don't have a solution, so you don't really have the answer to that part. So you go and look for the answers to the pieces that you have. But I think what will happen in terms of reopening the economy is just like many countries together decided to shut down their economies. The fact that many countries are opening their economies means will push India also further down that road. I mean, if you look at what's happening in Italy or Spain today, these are countries where hundreds of people continue to die even today. And the numbers of cases is still much higher than in India even today. But they have decided to reopen their economy. Shops are open. In a few countries, schools are open, right? So, which seems astounding that they have sort of decided apparently in the middle of an epidemic to reopen the economy. And I think partly that's because they recognize the harm that can happen on the economic side as well. I think the question also is partly about mental health, and that's a genuine concern as well. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety at a time like this. And again, but the unfortunate reality is that the development deficits are broad. We don't have enough institutions of mental health. We don't have enough practitioners of mental health counseling. And all of these things, I'll tell you what the general problem is. We think that every problem is manageable by incremental response. And when something like a virus or a pandemic hits you, you realize that this incremental strategy that you have is totally useless. Absolutely. It may as well not exist, because what is needed is not a little more of what you have yesterday. You need several orders of magnitude more things, and you can't produce that in one day.
So we have a couple more questions, Ashwin. So maybe we can have the responses to 1 minute, and we'll do just all the questions.
Okay.
Ishwaran asked this. India has 1.3 billion people, 1/3 approximately of the US, packed in about 1/3 the area of the US, which is a factor of 9. Yet, we have managed so far to keep the fatalities low. Other than the lockdown, what are the factors that have helped India in a big way, to my mind, I guess, to a pandemic like this? He says India's biggest weaknesses have been population, lopsided healthcare system, and the lack of social security. But what are your thoughts?
Like I said earlier, I don't see population as a weakness. Population is a potential source of strength too. But also, a lot of people talk about size and numbers of people. On that, unrelated to COVID, there's something we should think about. India is the most livable large country in the world. Other countries that are large, like Russia, China, America, have very large tracts of land that are fundamentally unlivable, right? For example, I think only a few percent, maybe 7 to 10%, 11% of Canada is agriculturally viable. It's arable. The numbers in America may not be much higher. Even China, which has fertile stretches of land on the eastern seaboards, it's not particularly viable for agriculture for a lot of it. Whereas more than 50% of Indian land is arable, and therefore it can support settlements and civilizations and things like that. And that's one of the reasons why, one of the things that makes India very different. We have to think about, and also outside of our cities, outside of our really large cities, crowding is not as evident or as different than what it might be in a Korea or in Italy or something like that, right? So here's a good way of thinking about it. Karnataka is bigger than the UK and has roughly the same population. So what is broadly true of India isn't necessarily true of your part of India. So in a way, you can sort of think about it from that perspective as well. I would, on the second part of the question, the weakness in the healthcare system is genuine, right? The public, too many people are choosing private. 63% of people in India are saying that they do not trust the public health system at all. and would rather spend their own money going to the private health system, even if the public system is free. Right? That trust cannot be changed overnight. One thing that will help is that a 4,500 rupee test is available free in the public health system. Therefore, people may go to the public health system. But they would prefer it if that same test was available free in the private health system because they trust that place a little bit more. I've known people who called to say, I'm not feeling well, but I'm afraid to go to the hospital. Now, this person could actually have COVID, right? And be sitting in their home environment and giving it to 3 other people, but they're actually afraid to go to the hospital, right? We can't have a system in which the trust deficit makes the problem worse. We have to build systems with, more trust so that the problems remain manageable in a participatory way. And I think that's the real weakness. It's not public and private alone. The way our public and private have evolved has created a shortage of trust in the public system.
I know Abhishek has also asked another question, a 30-second response for it, please, Ashwin, before and after which I'll have one more small 30-second question for you. Abhishek says, how can we equip ourselves to tackle such irresponsibility? What kind of information literacy or media literacy programs do we need?
Well, like I said, again, it's not one of those things you can do in a fortnight. But broadly, a lot of things that we call media are not really media. They are what I call he said, she said platforms. We just collect a bunch of quotes from various people, put them together, and call it a news organization. That's not helping. I think we need a lot more informed presentation in the media. But for this, the public also needs to support that media. If the public wants all its content to be free, it will be given a shallow product. Fundamentally, there's no getting away from the fact that journalists need to make a living, editors need to make a living, filmmakers need to make a living, and audiophile makers need to make a living. So I think it's not until people recognize that the things that they care about in a situation like this are things that they should be routinely supporting and paying for. It's not going to materialize in the crisis.
And I think you have just mentioned that so many times in this, in this talk, Ashwin, that unless we are involved every single day, we can't assume that we will just get involved suddenly when a pandemic rises, right? And on that note,
I would go further than that.
Yeah.
The pandemic is coming because you're not involved every single day.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not just you. If you were involved every single day, your politicians would be involved every single day too.
Yeah.
If your politicians are involved every single day, they would invest in healthcare and science and all of the things that could keep things like this pandemic at bay. So we think of our non-involvement as a small thing. What does it matter whether I do or don't?
Yeah.
But in fact, it's this butterfly flapping its wings kind of problem, right? The reason you have a pandemic is because you're not doing anything civic. It's not a straight line, it's a dotted line, but it's definitely there.
And on those lines, the last question shall we take from the audience? Mihika Shankar, she asks this: which would you prioritize higher? Reporting accurate number of cases or keeping the public calm and not spreading panic during the crisis?
I don't think we have the luxury of those kinds of trade-offs. I think that's why I made a distinction between cases and deaths. That I think we should do everything possible to keep the number of deaths low. That's what's going to convince the people. The people already accept that they can get malaria and TB and 70 other things, right? It's true, that's the reality. But they generally don't think they're going to die from it. Right? The real fear is, from a fast-spreading virus, is this fear that you're dying, and then every day in the news you see body counts on the television screen and things like that. You want to get away from that fear, and to get away from that fear, you have to say this isn't going to kill you. But unfortunately, some combination of alleviative treatment, existing drugs, plasma, all these things has to kick in to hold the line, and all of these are in some kind of experimental stage. I'm hoping, with so many scientists trying, that something will come out of all of this.
Absolutely. And last, if you had to give our learner one piece of advice in problem solving for the community, what would it be?
Well, I would say what I've said earlier in this call too, that fundamentally, I think connect your habits to problem solving. That's all it is. If your habits are connected to problem solving, then more problems will get solved. You don't actually need to know the solutions, but your habits have to be connected to problem solving. You can do a lot of things even if you start from zero knowledge, because your habits will give you the opportunity to acquire the knowledge that you want to. So, persistence is important. Become habituated to problem solving. Do it with others. These are simple things that work well, pandemic or no pandemic.
Super, Ashwin. That was a phenomenal engagement from you, and thank you so much for your thoughtful answers to all the thoughtful questions. I must thank the viewers for their super engagement too. Vimal?
Thank you, Raji. It was nice being on the Beyond 8 show, and good luck. Stay safe, all of you at HLC and Beyond 8.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Ashwin. Thank you so much, Raji. This was indeed a very insightful session. For me, the key takeaways were two things. One is persistence. Persistence in terms of continuing to do what we're doing. And the second one, you just can't wake up in the morning and decide to be such a journalist, right? You've got to do years of habit formation and doing a lot of things correct over a period of time before you can actually go make an impact or solve a problem in the society. And that sort of leads us to the next topic that we wanted to talk about, right? Two things. Why are we even doing these sessions, right? And what's beyond it got to do with this? The first one is, this is in some sense a habit formation that we want to feed into the young minds. This session is as much for your children as much as it's for you. So we would like you to encourage your children, young adults, to listen to these sessions so that they can get exposure to a variety of things, so that they form the right habits, they form the right right way of thinking and right way of going and solving problems in the society. And to see that in a more organic matter is why we started Beyond 8. Beyond 8 has two key things that you probably need to keep in mind. One is what we do on a short-term basis. So if you have a young child who wants to get an exposure to something he's interested in, something he's passionate about, you could take up some of the short-term programs that's available. In fact, there is one 2-hour session with Dr. Ashwin, which is available today. You could probably go to learn.beyond8.in. And there is a session there on sustainability, on clean energy. Dr. Ashwin is also the founder and co-founder and CEO of Lithium, one of the largest clean energy car rentals in the world. So you can take a look at his session and how he was part of the session with this startup and what work he did at NASA and a lot of other social changes that he brings today. So that's called learn.beyond8.in. Along with that, there's a lot of other bunch of short-term courses available for your young adults, which you should probably make use of. The second one is in terms of habit formation or something long-term, which is what we call as Beyond 8 High School. It is not a school, it's not an alternative school, but it is an alternative to schooling. Our only intent there is that our children should probably not do the mistakes that we did as we grew up in the 80s and the 90s, where we ended up going into just because our friends and family are encouraging young children to identify their passions, embrace it, and follow it without sacrificing on the academic rigor that's required to do well. And it's just not about successful careers, but it's about meaningful lives. So in summary, just look at a couple of things. One is our high school program, which is essentially for children who want to pursue passions, who are passionate, and we want to do something very different with their lives. It's the Beyond 8 High School. You could take a look at it at beyond8.in/high-school. The second is our short-term programs, the courses like what I was mentioning about, where Dr. Ashwin, in fact, ran a 2-hour session on clean energy. And there are a lot of other sessions also. There are about 10 other speakers there who've run sessions, and more sessions will be coming soon. And to sum up on the out-of-the-box session, this series is on embracing the new normal. All right, we are looking at various aspects. We spoke about education, we spoke about farming and sustainability, and then today we spoke about how can we solve public problems, right? And the next week we're going to talk about another aspect of embracing the new normal, right? It's about fitness. So we have Hari, who's the founder of FitKids, who'll be with us next Friday at 11 a.m. speaking about how we can probably get a little fitter, get a little healthier in the times of change, right? So don't forget to tune in next week, Friday, 8th May, 11 a.m. for a session on embracing a new normal and how we get fitter during the days of lockdown. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on all the other channels that we are on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you think you have somebody in your family, friend network, a child who's passionate about something but is struggling in the current education system, ask them to take a look at Beyond It. Thank you so much, and have a good day and have a good weekend ahead. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you next week.